Us, a word that echoes across centuries and generations. You can't spell us without you. And you know the struggle that so many of us face every single day. You know the fight for justice and fairness. You know the fight to make one job be enough. The fight for access to affordable health care that keeps us healthy. And today, too many have forgotten that you can't be united without us. I'm Justin J. Pearson, and I'm proud to be one of us, a Memphian born and raised who understands how to build bridges across race, identity, ethnicity, and generations in order to build the future that we want to live into. We stood together to fight against the billion-dollar corporations and crude oil pipelines that tried to divide our communities and fracture our future. When I went to serve in Nashville, we knew better when we stood up for democracy, even after I got expelled fighting for gun violence prevention. We always stand up against those who try to silence us, push us to the periphery, push us to the back, in the places that should represent us. For me and my family, this community has always raised us up in the good times and the trying moments. Now I am ready to fight for us in the United States Congress. The U.S. House of Representatives must be centered on us. It's about understanding what it means to be one of us, Memphians, people in District 9 who care about opportunity, justice, and fairness. This is our chorus, the chorus of us. Join us.
You don't understand. You don't truly understand why you're standing there today. You don't truly understand why I authored that resolution. Just because you don't get your way, you can't come to the well, bring your friends, and throw a temper tantrum with an adolescent bullhorn. And what you could do, you could file a piece of legislation that maybe you'd do that instead of sitting back and criticizing folks that's worked really hard for the past decade to do so. That might be a place to start. But certainly don't start by commandeering the well while we're conducting business here in this Tennessee General Assembly. That's why you're standing there, because of that temper tantrum that day, for that yearning to have attention. That's what you wanted. Well, you're getting it now.
How many of you want to be spoken to that way? We're not talking about politics. We're not talking about even gun violence. How many of you would want to be spoken to that way?
I don't personally want attention. What I want is attention on the issue of gun violence. But instead, we're here with a resolution you put up talking about expelling me for advocating for ending gun violence in the state of Tennessee.
And so the message for all the people in Nashville who decided to expel us: you can't expel hope. You can't expel justice. You can't expel our voice. And you sure can't expel our fight. We look forward to continuing to fight, continuing to advocate until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Let's get back to work.
It is a bill that is squarely designed to make the people and our culture more virtuous, and frankly, virtue is something that we're lacking a bit in our culture right now, and it's one of the reasons that our culture is struggling as much as it is.
How remarkable that you think you know what all Americans, all Tennesseans believe. And that if we are not supportive of this very narrow, discriminatory view, there's something wrong with our virtues. Transgender people are people, Representative, and deserve to be treated as such by this body too.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 420 simply asks the governor to redesign the state seal to include the words "In God We Trust" on it.
So it is interesting that we are seeking to put "In God We Trust" on our Tennessee Great Seal, and we haven't even had a conversation about which God we're talking about. I'm really worried that we are pontificating and painting on our Great Seal a God to bow down to who is not the God that loves and cares for everybody, but instead might be a God who idolizes and who supports white supremacy, capitalistic exploitation, or patriarchy.
Members, this bill is a bill under Title 49 of our code to specify that private schools pre-K through 12 have the ability to develop their own firearms policy. Under current law, private schools K through 12 are already vested with that ability. This bill simply expands K through 12 to pre-K through 12.
This type of legislation continues to prevent us from doing the work that we are supposed to do, which is protecting the most vulnerable in our state, which are our children. We really need to be focusing on and prioritizing and working on and coming to the well about our big issues that resolve the gun violence epidemic in the state of Tennessee. That's what we need to be doing, not allowing private schools to have handgun carry permit policies that could, in effect, lead to more people going into schools with our children with weapons.
Here's the reality of the situation. Congress, both parties have failed our country. Article 1, Section 4, the Constitution gives rules of naturalization to Congress. Congress has failed us. That's one of the reasons we're in the position where we have a resolution urging the federal government to fix the problem, because we have administrations with executive orders fixing the issue.
If this resolution was going to be effective, it would reach out to the people who fund the Department of Homeland Security. And just really quick, that's not the president. That's the United States Congress. So if this resolution was going to be effective and not a political pandering tool, it would address the people in positions of power, like the Speaker of the House of the United States Congress, and tell them they need to act in a more just way instead of bringing legislation before the Tennessee General Assembly asking us to codify and support xenophobia and racism and separation and division of immigrants in our communities.
The reason that I believe the sponsor of this legislation, of this resolution, spoke that way is because he's comfortable doing it. Because there's a decorum that allows it. There's a decorum that allows you to belittle people. We didn't belittle nobody. What we said was that we cannot be beholden to gun lobbyists, to the NRA. We can't be beholden to organizations that don't want to see us make progress on gun violence. We can't be beholden to folks who don't want to see us help save our communities and protect them. But there's something else I think that the sponsor of this resolution has alluded to, and there were a few things here that you said that I want to address. He called a peaceful protest a temper tantrum. Is what's happening outside these doors by Tennesseans who want to see change a temper tantrum? I'd much rather be talking with you about legislation to protect Shelby County and to protect our communities than talking about why we don't deserve to have our representation lost because we came to the well of this house saying we've got to do something. That's what I would like to be doing. And so you brought attention or tried to bring attention to me, but I want to turn the attention to the people. The people who will never be able to throw a temper tantrum for gun violence. You know, the Larry Thorns, the Catherine Kuntzes, the Mike Hills, the Cynthia Peaks, the Evelyn Decaus, the Haley Scruggs, the William Kennedys, who will never have a chance to throw what you call a temper tantrum for justice, for gun reform, for the ending of gun violence. They'll never have a chance because we haven't taken our oath seriously. Because we don't take people who we disagree with seriously. We tell them, you just are throwing a temper tantrum. And again, these are the same folks who live in one of the greatest democracies, as we've been told, in the United States of America. A place, and an institution, in fact, I would argue, that was built on protest. An institution that was built on people throwing temper tantrums against injustice and what they viewed as injustice. It isn't a temper tantrum to say that kids should actually go to schools that are safe. Neighborhoods shouldn't have to have thousands of police officers to be safe.
We shouldn't have to worry about going to the grocery store, as in some cases going to the movie theater and someone coming with an assault rifle and killing us. That's not throwing a temper tantrum, sponsor. That's just asking for us to do right. We're going to continue to fight to ensure that more lives are not lost to the epidemic of gun violence in our communities. And so, yes, if I'm expelled from this house, I will not have the opportunity to fight for that legislation as a member, but you can believe that I will continue to fight for our communities and to fight for just legislation in the state of Tennessee.
We've got a problem in this state. We got a proliferation of gun violence because of policies and practices and legislation coming from the state legislature of Tennessee. Reducing the permitless carry, removing the permit to carry weapons, reducing the age from 21 to 18, saying that to fix school shootings, just arm teachers. We've got a problem in Nashville, and it's called a promise that they're holding on to with this status quo. Yeah, see, their allegiance is to the way that things are. Their allegiance is to business as usual. Their allegiance is to the National Rifle Association. Their allegiance is to the Tennessee Firearms Association. But when we went to the well of the House, myself, Representative Johnson, and Representative Jones, what we did was say we have an allegiance to a people. People who are tired of business as usual. People who are tired of same old politics. People who are tired of same old politicians. We've got people that we have an allegiance to who are willing to march for justice, who are willing to fight for justice, who are willing to vote for justice. And it is that spirit which I will head back to Nashville with. And what we have shown here in Shelby County, what we have shown here in Memphis, Tennessee, with my fiance, my brothers, my family, my parents, and my family here, is that we do not speak alone. We speak together. We fight together.
The purpose of this bill is to strengthen the prohibition on the divisive concepts that are part of TCA 49-719 and promote freedom of expression and educational excellence. The impact is to keep colleges about advancing knowledge and not advancing personal, political, or social agendas.
This is a deeply concerning bill because it is continuing a pattern of practice that is harmful to all people. When you begin to attack education and educational institutions that seek to tell the truth about racism, sexism, these other quote-unquote divisive concepts, when you try to control what a person thinks, then you are assuming the role of God rather than allowing the freedom of thought that built American educational institutions. I'll read some of this bill because I've got some folks here from Memphis and folks who are watching who need to see what the Tennessee General Assembly is calling divisive in our time. An individual, by virtue of the individual's race or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. This is to prevent white folks in particular for being told they had anything to do with enslavement. This is an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or another form of psychological distress solely because of the individual's race or sex. A meritocracy which does not exist because a society that committed genocide against Native Americans, enslaved black African American people for over 250 years, cannot be a meritocracy because we didn't all start at the same place. But you will not be able to say a meritocracy is inherently racist or sexist or designed by a particular race or sex to oppress another sex, despite the fact that in the United States of America's Constitution that we all swear an oath on, black people were considered 3/5 of a person. Only rich white men could vote, not women. But you tell us that those things we wouldn't be able to talk about if we operate business as usual and not do the work of justice. America is redeemable. The state of Tennessee is redeemable. But if we do not do the work of repenting through true education, by telling the truth, or as Memphian Ida B. Wells says, shining the light of truth upon our institutions and upon our lived experiences, which has made it much more likely for you to stand there than for me if we do not tell the truth about our past and our present injustices. The state of Tennessee, the United States of America, will not be redeemed. This is the work that we should be committing to, not banning people's ability to think critically about how we got to where we are, because we're trying to preserve a status quo that has hurt us. But I've got good news. No matter what you do, people always rise.
Thank you so much. My concern about this bill is that it is anti-transgender people and children. It seems that we are persisting on a path of legislating discrimination and inequity. And I am wondering, Representative Bulso, what you're going to do in order that we stop moving forward legislation that attacks LGBTQIA children.
Representative Bulso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would disagree with the premise of the question. This is a bill that I think advances a different view, what I can call the American view. As you know, in one of our country's founding documents, Thomas Jefferson wrote that we hold these truths to be self-evident, which recognizes, one, that there is such a thing as truth, and not just that, but it's something that is capable of being understood. Some truths are so clear that they are, quote, self-evident. This is legislation that is designed to make our citizens more virtuous, which is the very reason that we have a government, a constitutional republic in the first place, as represented by Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams in our founding documents.
Out of order.
It is so interesting that you changed the words of Thomas Jefferson from what he actually wrote, which was all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it is also interesting that all of the names that you mentioned who built the foundations of this country were elite, slave-owning white men. It is fascinating that you think those are the virtues that we need to propagate and support by passing anti-transgender children legislation. And how remarkable that you think you have the American view. The lack of democratic behavior, the lack of supporting of inclusion, the lack of supporting people for who they truly are, that is against who we are. That's why you even had to try and change the name from all men to all people. Well, transgender people are people, Representative, and deserve to be treated as such by this body too.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 420 simply asks the governor to redesign the state seal to include the words "In God We Trust" on it.
Thank you, Speaker. We all gotta preach from time to time, because the art of preaching is professing a gospel in the Christian faith or in any faith about love and justice. You have brought before this hallowed house a piece of legislation to encourage the governor to submit a design of the Great Seal of the state of Tennessee by July 1st, 2025, that incorporates the language, quote, "In God we trust." Professing, as I assume you are trying to do, that here in the state of Tennessee, it is in God we trust. A God, as my colleague spoke about, who cares how we act and how we treat the most marginalized. A God who cares about how we act and how we treat the poor, those who've been pushed to the periphery. In God we trust is
what we are seeking here, to encourage our governor to add to our great seal of the state of Tennessee. And I have to wonder, which God are we trusting in? Because we all have different faiths and backgrounds and traditions and beliefs. And I welcome the clergy here from around the nation who believe in a God that forces some people to march for justice. A God that forces some folks not to silence the voices of people who are marginalized and pushed to the periphery. So it is interesting that we are seeking to put "In God We Trust" on our Tennessee Great Seal, and we haven't even had a conversation about which God we're talking about. And some people here have these gods that they worship. Some of us have these gods that we bow down to. Some people here have these gods that we love and that we idolize, that silence voices and shun the poor and pass legislation to silence the majority. Some people have this God that they worship, and I think in this house of conversation and this hallowed house of debate, there should have been more conversation about which God we were putting our trust in, because I'm concerned that the God that you are encouraging the governor of this state to put on the Great Seal of Tennessee to represent all 7 million of us in perpetuity is not the same God we trust with inclusion. It's not the same God we trust with elevating the lowly. I'm worried that we're not talking about the God that pushes people from the periphery to the center. I'm worried that we're not trusting in the God that does the work of justice and love. I'm really worried that we are pontificating and painting on our great seal a God to bow down to who is not the God that loves and cares for everybody, but instead might be a God who idolizes and who supports white supremacy, capitalistic exploitation, or patriarchy. And we haven't had a conversation in this hallowed house about what God we're trusting in. Is it the same God that has brought us to this place through liberation? The God who has ensured that even amidst, some might say, expulsion, resurrection happened? Or is it a God of silencing? We didn't have a conversation about what God we're trusting in. And that's really important if you're going to say that this God that you want us to have our governor to put on the design of the Great Seal of the state of Tennessee is going to represent all of our different perspectives and identities. There was an article written about it called "Is Tennessee a Democracy?" And I believe today we are getting a very clear answer that it is not. This is not how democracies operate. You want to talk about 1776, you realize that the people weren't cordoned off. If you want to talk about liberty and justice, you want to talk about the values of being a real American, is to know that the First Amendment comes first, and that our right to have freedom of speech is paramount in a democracy. And the rules that are being put forward now are to limit freedom of speech. And it is not just the freedom of speech of representatives. You are limiting the freedom of speech of our constituents. Constituents who come here and say, we want you to do something about the environment or about gun violence, about community safety. You, with these rules, are silencing our constituents' voices. And how? With these rules, it would be out of order for anyone in these galleries to have an 8 by 11 piece of paper that says do something, or protect kids, not guns, or ban assault rifles, or stop mass shootings and act, they would be unable to go into committee rooms for you to see what it is that they are concerned about. Some signs say, I'm a Republican voter for gun safety. You're saying with these rules that the folks who want you to know what they think are not deserving of being heard. This abuse of power through the rules that folks would be able to hearken back to and say, well, but they didn't follow the rules. But they didn't follow the rules. But they didn't follow the rules. But the rules were made unjustly. Many laws are being made unjustly. Many members being called out of order unjustly, and the opportunity to respond, to get your claim heard, is being taken away by these rules. And so for our constituents who are here and people who are in the galleries who've been forced to one side of the gallery so that lobbyists can be on the other side, are being denied the right to have their voices and their issues heard. And so I only have two questions. One is, where in these rules has it been made explicit that we were going to close one of the galleries to the public, from the public, and only allow press and media and lobbyists on one side, which hasn't happened before? My other question is back to what the former representative said. In these rules, have we changed it so that individuals with guns cannot come into Cordell Hall? Because that's a statement, even if you don't carry a sign.
Leader Lambert.
All right, so a lot to unpack there, and thank you for your comments. This is actually a constitutional federal republic. So I know that words democracy and republic get interchanged sometimes, but it is a constitutional federal republic. And I don't see any need for us to yell back and forth. I'm just going to make a few comments, and I'll respectfully listen to you if that's okay. I just would like to go back and forth. So the rules do not address the issue that you mentioned as far as firearms. They do address signs and other things, but these particular rules do not address that issue. There is ample security available in the Capitol through the THP. I see no reason why a member would be carrying a firearm, but that is not referenced within here. It is also not completely a free speech arena. This is not the public arena. So you can't just shout out anything you'd like or say anything. It is supposed to be on the subject that we're debating. Otherwise, it would devolve into chaos. The way that you have a republic is that each of us got elected to be the voice of roughly 70,000 people. And I would like to listen to your points, and I would ask that you respectfully listen to mine so that we can have an exchange of ideas. If more people did it in the world, in my humble opinion, we would solve a lot of these problems that we face.
This is about power. And this is the misuse of governmental power and the abuse of power on the minority party. A lot of people who studied federalism and government, you know, the factions, the people who advocated that the minority always have a voice, but this is what's going to happen. And I'll go to the rules here. You have at 2, in the third paragraph, that if a member causes a material disruption to order under this rule, and the House shall decide the case without debate. Where is the democracy in that? If you say, as you just did with this extension of time opportunity, that it allows us to go back and forth, to talk through things, to figure things out, why is it that you all and the Rules Committee have put forward rules that can have members silenced without debate? It's not just there in the rules. As it relates to order in the gallery, the power of the people is disrupted. Any case of any disturbance or disorderly conduct in the gallery or lobby, the speaker or the chair of the committee of the whole shall have power to order the same to be cleared. There's not even a vote without debate. Again, if sustained by the House is another phrase that's used. If a member's remarks aren't exactly to the liking of one of these members in this building, they say if sustained by the House, if sustained by the House. So that means that people who are in the majority party can silence people without any votes from anyone else. Where's the democracy? If we are going to be true to the ideals, the ideas that folks are articulating, we have to vote against these rules in order that we might pass rules toward justice, that we might pass legislation that addresses the needs that got us here in the first place. And it wasn't to tell people not to bring signs that say, "Am I next?" and do something and ban assault weapons. That wasn't the purpose. It was to lift up the voices of people who can't speak anymore due to gun violence. And instead, it's becoming a bludgeon of an abuse of power by the members who passed this. So I ask everyone, if you do care about democracy, if you do care about the amendments, care about the First Amendment, or we're going to continue to see the folks who are already marginalized and mistreated and told to sit down and told they're out of order, we're going to see that being rubber stamped with rules. And that is immoral and that is wrong. Thank you, Speaker and sponsor. I have to say, I am appalled that this legislation is before us again. Look, we don't need to be giving people policies that allow for them to bring firearms into schools. And I believe my colleague and friend, he's going to say, well, this bill simply says we're going to expand this to pre-K just like it is for other private schools. But the message that we are sending as a body is wrong. At a time when gun violence is the #1 killer of our children in this state, as we still deal with the wake of the school shooting here in our own community where this capital is, we do not need to be putting forward legislation like this that is giving private schools license to have handgun carry policies that could allow for more guns to be allowed in our schools. I'm also deeply troubled by the hypocrisy for private schools compared to public schools. And if you read the fiscal note here, Tennessee Code subsection 39171309 establishes certain criminal offenses for carrying weapons on private school property, but exempts persons permitted to carry a handgun on a private K-12 school's property by the school's handgun carry policy. But if a person in a public school were to go on to that property with a handgun, it would be a criminal offense automatically. And so what we are allowing, and what I am frustrated by with this legislation, and the reason I think my colleagues, we should not support it, is that we do not need to have policies, laws, and legislation that is further increasing the possibility of allowing more people to come to our schools with handguns or with firearms. You all know that in our state, due to terrible legislation passed by the General Assembly, you no longer even need a permit to carry a gun. And now it is making it so that private schools will be able to have very low restrictions for people who bring guns into schools. And I am curious, sponsor, if the students who are there or the teachers who are there are, forgive me, if the students and the teachers are there are admitting or signing a document that they are okay with a handgun carry policy that could further endanger their children. You know, this type of legislation, it isn't addressing emotional and psychological trauma of gun violence. It is not helping kids. It is not preventing tragedies. The truth is, sponsor, the truth is, kids aren't just at school. We've got to be holistic in how we approach this problem of gun violence, because nearly every day in my district, in our community, we are dealing with the ramifications of legislation that does not address the root causes of problems. And instead, we hear, as I'm sure we will, that this is just administrative. It's a very small change. When what we really need to be focusing on and prioritizing and working on and coming to the well about are big issues that resolve the gun violence epidemic in the state of Tennessee. Instead of focusing on the root causes of the problems. We're looking to give more leeway to private schools. This isn't how we should be governing to address the epidemic that we are living in. And I fear that allowing private schools this tacit encouragement to have laws or to have regulations like this is actually us giving tacit encouragement for more people to bring weapons into places where they should never be. That's why I am voting against this legislation, and is why I encourage each and every one of you to vote against it as well. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. This was rushed through our committee, State Government Committee, sort of toward the tail end, but I'll start where I ended there. This legislation is xenophobic, it is racist, and it is harmful to undocumented people and immigrants in our communities. There are a couple of things you can read in this resolution that should give everyone pause, because it is political pandering and not seeking to address any real meaningful change. If, to my colleague's point, you really wanted to address this, you wouldn't be talking to the executive branch in the first place. You would reach out to your Congress people who you got documentation from, and you'd send a resolution to the U.S. Congress, the House, and the Senate there, and tell them that they need to fund the effective measures that would do what you're asking to be done. You wrote in this resolution, whereas the failed policies of the Biden administration have made every state a border state and have allowed more than 10 million illegal immigrants to cross into our country since the president took office, and whereas the border problem is the leading cause of the fentanyl crisis, which has caused and continues to cause death of countless victims, but you refuse to expand Medicaid in the state of Tennessee that would help rural communities in particular who are disproportionately dying from fentanyl overdoses, whereas the border is a conduit, you say, for enabling human trafficking, leading to the rape and death of countless women and children, whereas you say all these things without a single statistic other than political posturing and racism and xenophobia at the root of this legislation. This is the problem. Governor Greg Abbott is going in direct contradiction to the law. While carrying a banner of law and order, Governor Greg Abbott is violating the law. And you are telling us lawmakers who swore on Bibles and to the United States Constitution and the Tennessee State Constitution to support somebody who is breaking the law? This is pathetic. It is not just a waste of our time, it is a pathetic use of our time. And it is a disgusting use of our time because, sponsor, what I fear you and some of my colleagues are doing is fomenting a cultural war of division to other people, to separate people who are migrants and immigrants for people who are citizens. What I fear you all are doing with legislation like this and toxic language like calling human beings illegal is doing nothing but continuing the very harmful and devastating policies and legislation and ideology that lead to harm of the most marginalized. We need to urge the federal government to do something to help make sure that people who come to our borders are safe, to ensure that there's a pathway to citizenship, to ensure that we do everything possible to make sure families aren't separated, because somebody mentioned the previous president, and forgot about all the children who were separated from their parents who will never see them again. We cannot continue to pass legislation and to put forward these kinds of resolutions that do nothing but foment hatred and bigotry and division, instead of saying, what can we do to be of service? Like making sure we have things in multiple languages, welcoming the immigrant. That is the call of our faith and of our lives. This does not do that, so I'm voting no.
I'm sad to see that the Tennesseans that are watching this tonight might see that some members in this House don't take serious their health. And I think that is quite indeed a travesty. I have several cited resources from both the news channels, ABC and MSNBC, to Yale.edu documents that lay out a long history of injection of aerosols into our atmosphere with the hope of controlling the temperature of the earth.
I'm taking this is to prevent global warming. Is this what this is an attempt, this bill to do is prevent global warming?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is, as it clearly states, is to prohibit the injection of chemicals and chemical compounds into our atmosphere.
Representative Mitchell.
So is the Tennessee Air Force going to enforce this legislation, or who will enforce this?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just read to you something from the House Energy, the U.S. House Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, page 119, for those of you all have a copy and want to follow along. The recommendation provides not less than $39 million to improve the understanding of key cloud, aerosol, precipitation, and radiation processes. The department is encouraged to coordinate with the Department of Homeland Security and other agencies as relevant to support the analysis of near-term climate risks and impacts on infrastructure and communities. Within available funding, $3 million is for pilot program to provide instrumentation for the observing marine aerosols, greenhouse gases, and other environmental factors as relevant, deployed on commercial or other non-dedicated ocean vessels. So with that, and to my colleague, I would offer that you do some homework and see that this is actually a real thing.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I'm going to trust Harvard. I'm going to trust Harvard over the House Republicans in Congress. And it's very appropriate. This bill is on the calendar on April 1st.
My question to you, sir, and it's a serious question. You brought the amendment, not us. Do you believe in Bigfoot?
Representative Clemens.
About as much as I believe in a conspiracy theory about contrails. But as you can read in the amendment, it refers to those who do believe in Bigfoot. Unfortunately, I am not those within the pseudoscience of cryptozoology. Therefore, I would just leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Leader. I appreciate the question.
Representative Mitchell. Oh, Leader, you're good. Sorry. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I tried my best to listen to the amendment. The clerk read it so fast, but I guess I got it. Am I speaking to the sponsor of the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Sponsor. Mr. Sponsor. Mr. Sponsor. Oh, okay. In the amendment, does it make Bigfoot the official Sasquatch of the state of Tennessee?
Representative Clemens.
It does not.
Representative Parkinson.
I'm not sure if this is a point of order or not, but can we amend the amendment to make Bigfoot the official Sasquatch of Tennessee?
Well, Representative, first of all, you've got to get one drafted. So, Representative Parkinson. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Towns. Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, hearing this piece of legislation in the Agriculture Committee, and of course, testimony from a doctor out of East Tennessee, the discussion came to silver iodide, and they use that for seed clouding, creating it to rain. But the question for the amendment sponsor, we know that it will cause birth defects and cancer in human beings. Will it do likewise in Sasquatch?
Representative Clemens.
You know, that's a better question for somebody within the pseudoscience of cryptozoology. Is that better, Leader? Thank you.
All right. Representative Reedy? No more. Any further discussion? Representative Pearson. We're on the amendment.
Yes. We're on Chairman Clemens' amendment, right?
Correct.
Okay, I'm just making sure nothing changed. So yes, I know. Chairman Clemens, can you talk about this pseudoscientific group of people and what it is they believe about chemtrails? I know you're not a part of that group, but what are the consequences of people believing sort of these conspiracy theories and its effects? And I heard my previous colleague mention things like birth defects and cancer, and I would have loved to see legislation dealing with pollution or things like that in our communities, but that's not what we're addressing. So, Leader, can you talk, Chairman, can you talk a little bit more about why dealing in conspiracy theories is happening versus addressing some of the real issues, or why you think that we need to be dealing with different issues?
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Representative Pearson. I appreciate the question. I question the focus here. We do have a lot of issues that are going into our atmosphere that are man-made, unfortunately, a lot of abuse of our environment and our natural environment. We want to protect, all of our nature and organisms and living organisms and environmental welfare from broad-scale harm that is taking place across the country. And it's unfortunate that we are focused on these conspiracy theory type ideas being the cause for some of that, or I believe that there's such a thing. There's a claim that they're mind engineering and things like that. And I guess I just want to make sure here that we're not wasting the people of Tennessee's time and resources and focusing on issues that matter here, that are actually harming our environment and our atmosphere.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you. One of the things that's mentioned in this amendment, which is pulled from the initial legislation by my colleague who's in the well, is supporting this theory. And colleagues, if you look up this, the first things that you're going to see is that the chemtrail conspiracy theory is erroneous belief that long-lasting condensation trails left in the sky by high-flying aircraft are actually chemtrails consisting of chemical or biological agents sprayed for nefarious purposes undisclosed to the general public. And in this amendment, and also it's in the initial amendment, you sort of share some similar language. It is talking about the federal government potentially using its power and authority to disperse chemicals into the atmosphere, and that those activities might be occurring in the state of Tennessee. And so, sponsor, do you know of any case at all from the Department of Environment and Conservation or otherwise where the federal government is actually spraying chemicals on people in our state?
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not, nor have I ever heard of anything such.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you. And so legislation or amendments that are seeking to sort of put forward this theory, as the language in this one is seeking to do you believe that the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, who is responsible for monitoring air, soil, and water quality, regulating industrial and agricultural emissions into the air, soil, and water within the state of Tennessee to ensure the safety of the public while not impeding agriculture or commerce within the state, would have notified the General Assembly if there were instances where the federal government was intentionally dispersing chemicals into our atmosphere?
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would be confident that Commissioner Hatcher or one of the other commissioners would have raised this very serious issue, given that agriculture is such a driving force in our economy across the state of Tennessee. If there was something like this being done that would be harmful to the population or our crops or our livestock across the state of Tennessee or our soil, I'm confident that, I would like to think the Lee administration would have made us aware of that.
We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2691 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 22 nay, one present not voting.
Senate Bill 2691 and received constitutional majority. I hereby declare pass without objection. The most read, serious table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.